It had only been a few moments ago, it seemed, that she'd groomed his unruly hair so it wouldn't stick out, or finishing the Winchester knot for his tie and tightening it towards his neck. It had been the perfect morning for the two of them. He'd had a smile on his face. He'd given her a quick peck on the cheek before leaving. And now, her husband was probably reduced to ash. The screaming of sirens, injured civilians, and replays of the explosion were airing on every news channel known to man. The TV droned on in the living room. Bright red, flashing banner flung a quarter of the way down from the screen. It was impossible for her to steady her hands. They shook violently with every stroke of the vegetable peel. She cut herself a couple of times, but didn't pay attention as the thin lines of red forming on her skin washed away by running sink water. She took a deep breath and put her hand over her face, thoughts pounding her skull in bombardments of fear, grief, and anxiety. Her husband had been in the White House. The explosion was massive, taking out the entirety of the grounds and left the building with a bald half, exposing the bare architecture and a vision inside of the chaos that had been wrought. The camera panned over the estate again. Many of the attendants lay lifeless and charred on the ground, their pristine blue uniforms following suit. There were only a few handful of survivors. They wept incessantly, choking on their words and stifling pain as they tried to explain what happened with ashy faces and dilated eyes with IVs dripping into their arms. She couldn't take it any longer. She abandoned dinner and let the peel clatter to the floor as she sank down with it, sagging helplessly against the cabinets and sobbing. She sobbed for the explosion. She sobbed for her husband. Through bleary eyes, she gazed at the magnificent silver band that adorned her finger. It was nothing now. She wasn't married to the love of her life anymore. But death, in her wallowing, she ached for his touch, ached for his voice and passionate love that sent her head reeling and electrified her soul. She would give anything to feel his lips upon hers again. The familiar creak of the door silenced her immediately. Her heart raced and stole every gasping breath she had. Shoes calmly clicked across the wooden floor, into the living room, and then into the kitchen. Her husband stood over her, sweat pooling down his face. His white undershirt caked with blood, his suit missing. She stood quickly and looked at him. His beautiful eyes were tired. He hugged her tightly, inhaling her perfume, then made his way to the bathroom. He cursed loudly as he dropped something into the bathtub. She smiled slightly, wiping the tears from her eyes. She praised whomever was watching in the sky that he had been spared from an awful fate. A few hours went by, and their house bathed in darkness, except for the soft yellow glow of his study. The mahogany door opened a crack. The husband leaned back in his chair, languidly puffing a cigar. The vanilla marinated in his mouth and exhaled in white, billowing smoke that reached the top of his bookcase. Gauze wrapped around his left arm and splayed over his bare chest. Now clean. He grimaced as a shot of pain twinged his muscles. He took a swig of vodka and relished the warmth that blossomed in his center. He heard her knock softly.
"Come in,"
he replied, snuffing the cigar out. His wife entered, hesitantly, not wanting to invade his sanctum of privacy. She couldn't look at him. She focused on her hands. He could tell that she'd been crying again. I didn't finish dinner, she confessed. I'm sorry. Did you want me to? Unconditional love gleamed in his eyes. He stared at her until she reciprocated.
No, it's all right.
Silence reigned once more between them. They drank each other in as if it was their first time meeting. The husband held out his arms to her.
Come here,
he breathed. She obliged and slid carefully into his lap, making sure not to strike the bandages. He guided her head gently on his chest, entangled his fingers into her hair, caressing each follicle. She sighed as she closed her eyes and listened to him breathe, listened to his heartbeat. The couple stayed like this for a few moments, holding one another in an embrace, refusing to let go. The wife spoke, her voice like a frightened, sweet child. I thought I lost you. He grasped her chin and tilted it up. He gazed intently into her eyes.
It was very close,
he admits.
but I'm here now. That's all that matters.
Before she could say anything else, he pressed his lips upon hers. She whimpered, still in disbelief that he was still alive. Realization of his presence seared her veins with passion. She locked her fingers in his and moaned as his tongue stroked hers, coaxing comfort. She relaxed instantly and melted away. He was alive. He was fine. He was with her again. The husband pulled away reluctantly. Their foreheads still touched, wanting more, shaking.
I'm putting you on a plane.
He whispered.
You'll be lounging on the beach somewhere in the Caribbean, soaking up the sun.
No, she whined. I want to stay here with you. He shook his head and pulled out his phone. He grimly made arrangements without a hint of joy in his voice. When all of the preparations were finished, he spoke into her hair.
They'll be here soon. Don't worry about your things. I've got it covered.
A prompt knock reiterated his statement. The husband carried his wife out of the safety of his study to the front door. 2 burly men waited on the other side, awaiting his command.
Go with them,
he said.
They'll protect you.
Her eyes widened in fear. She'd only gotten him back and now she was going to lose him once more. She bit her lip and attempted to stop the tears, yet they flowed anyway. I love you, she choked. He smiled and kissed her again.
I love you too.
The husband took a deep breath and strode to the bathroom. He tossed his burner phone carelessly into the bottom of the tub. It skittered among the porcelain to join the bomb detonator, and he reached under the sink for a container of acid. He sloshed the liquid on the tools and relished to see them melt into nothingness. He got dressed and went back into his study. He retrieved a 9mm pistol from his desk, then left the apartment. Going incognito was the best option. He knew his craft well. A day later, the complex was devastated by a fire. No tenants injured. An anonymous tip warned the residential manager of the threat. Taking no chances, everyone evacuated. When the police perused the phone records, it appeared that the tip was made halfway around the world. Afghanistan. The president died. A simple apartment complex burned to the ground. This was surely the work of extremists.